Good morning, students. Today we'll be discussing secondary data available over the internet and over other resources we have. What secondary data is? Secondary data basically is data gathered and recorded by someone else prior to and for a purpose other than the current project. For example, you are working on a project right now. For example, that project is CSR done by top 10 companies in India. For example, there are studies who have conducted data on CSR related to CSR of those 10 companies independently, individually. Then you can use that particular data for your study. And that is what difference. For example, you have got 10 companies. Out of 10, 5 companies data is available from some other researcher as well. So that is a kind of secondary data. Or for example, I have 10 companies in hand, company A, company B, company C, company D, up to company IJ. And these companies are already being researched by some other researcher independently. For example, company A is being studied independently by the researcher, company B is being studied independently by some other researcher. All these companies are being researched about, and that too about CSR. So what I'll do is I'll be reading those reports provided by those researchers, and that kind of the study is basically the study based on secondary data. Secondary data basically is historical. It is historical data available on the internet and libraries. For example, if I need to study a company for 10 years, and what I'll do is I will be reading annual report of that company for 10 years. 10 years annual report is basically historical data. Annual report of today, when I'm talking about a company in 2021, so annual report of previous years is actually historical data. Already assembled data, which is actually assembled by somebody else. Annual report is also a kind of already assembled data for the companies. Then needs no access to subjects. You do not have to go to companies to talk about the same data again and again. You will just get the data through other researchers, through online databases available. And when we talk about secondary data related to some subjects, not exactly related to companies. For example, you want to check human behavior about something, and the same behavior have been studied by some other researcher. It may be in some other country, maybe in some other city, and maybe in some other age group. Then you might be interested in studying. Then that is also a kind of data which would be known as secondary data. There are some advantages of secondary data. Number one, that it is inexpensive. Exactly. Because secondary data is available over the internet, and internet these days is considered as almost free, because of course you will be using internet for other things as well. It is not actually asking you to spend more money for this particular thing, at least. Then obtained rapidly. Yes, you can obtain it really quickly. Then of course, then primary data. Then information is not otherwise accessible. Sometimes information is not otherwise accessible, but it is available in the form of secondary data. Because if you want to go and assess human behavior from on your own, then it will take months and maybe some years. And it might not be accessible. Sometimes subjects are not available, humans are not available to be assessed. Sometimes they are little reluctant also. But if somebody has collected the same data, similar data, then it is very useful for you. For example, government data is often free. Like we said, it is inexpensive. So, but some disadvantages are also there. Number one, uncertain accuracy. Yes, you cannot 100% say that the data is 100% accurate. There, of course, the data is not actually 100% wrong. The researcher who has quoted the data, of course, he also might have taken some concerns regarding accuracy of the data, but still you cannot be 100% sure that data is 100% accurate. So that is why we can say that there is an uncertainty regarding the accuracy of data. Then data not consistent with needs. Sometimes you might be interested in checking some other human aspect and somebody else has checked some other human aspect. So that is how it is not consistent sometimes with your needs. Then if inappropriate units of measurement, some maybe you wanted to measure something on the scale of 10, but somebody else has done that on the scale of 3 only. Then there are actually less measurements available, so that might not be appropriate for your study now. Then time period inappropriate, due to which data is outdated, like this one. Sometimes data is also outdated. For example, you want to assess the data in 2020 and you want data from 2010 to 2020, and maybe the data available to you is only till 2010 or only maybe till 2000. So that is also a uh, kind of disadvantage of secondary data. Now evaluating data on certain parameters so as to confirm whether you are going to use that particular data or not. I mean, whether it would be accessible for you or not, whether it is going to be actually useful for you or not. So as per applicability to project objectives, you will be checking the data. Does the data help to answer questions set out in the problem definition? When you are going to talk about secondary data in research design, you already know that you have defined a problem. So you will be checking the secondary data as per problem definition, whether it actually fits or not. If it is a yes, then you will go ahead and then you'll be checking it, that does the data apply to time period of interest? Is it okay with the time period you want or not? If it is a yes, then next question is, does the data apply to the population of interest? Yes, it is also important whether it applies to the population you actually want or not. Sample size might be different, sample might be different, that's okay, but population should be similar. Then do the other terms and variables classifications presented apply or not? Are you comfortable with the terms and variables used in the secondary study with your current project or not? That is to be checked. If it is a yes, then you will be checking that are the units of measurement comparable or not. Units of measurement should always be comparable. Otherwise, there is no use using that particular secondary data. You can even modify the data as per the units of measurement as per your comfort, if those are measurable and those are actually changeable. Otherwise it will be of no use. This is about applicability as per project objectives. Then whether data is accurate or not, that is also to be checked. How would you check it? If possible, go to the original source of the data and check whether the data is correct or not. For example, if a researcher has stated profit of a company somewhere, then you can go to the annual report of the company and check it whether it is right or not. And sometimes maybe some data is like that you actually don't know the original source, so you'll check whether researcher has quoted something about the data, about the source of the data or not. If the researcher has not quoted about the source of the data, then it is unuseful. Otherwise, if he has quoted, then go and check the data whether it is original or not. Then, is the cost of data acquisition worth it? If in case you are to pay something for the data, or you are to bear some cost in any form for that particular data, in form of money, in form of time, in form of employees, sometimes you have in form of anything, then is it worth or not? You have to check it as per your project. Then is there a possibility of biasness? If data has some biasness, then you will not be using it because it is of no use then. Otherwise, go ahead. And the last is, can the accuracy of data collected be verified? Can you actually check the check that whether data collection has been actually done in accurately or not? So if it is a yes, then you should go ahead. That means data is accurate. Objectives of some secondary data studies might be like about fact finding. Sometimes you just want to know about some facts and you want to find them. So in that case, you can use secondary data. Sometimes model building, you already have loads of data available, you just want to build some models on those bases. Or database marketing, sometimes you just want to check databases and accordingly you will be marketing them. Let us discuss these three objectives of secondary data studies one by one with the help of examples. Number one, fact finding. Fact finding basically is to maybe identify consumer behavior. If you want to if you want to identify consumer behavior, then how will you do it? You will actually go to the consumers and check their behavior, right? But if data is available, some secondary data is available, then you will check the data and you will see whether actually customer is behaving this way, the way researcher has quoted or not. Then trend analysis. Sometimes to check the trends also we go for secondary data. For example, sales of a company is available for 10 years, you will just check the trend with the help of a graph. So that is how secondary data is used in trend analysis. Then environmental scanning. Environmental scanning can also be done very easily with the help of secondary data. Sometimes you just want to know various things about a company, and those are available in if those are available in a report, then that can help you scan the environment easily. Then model building. Model building basically is to check market potential about products or maybe forecasting sales, like we just did in trend analysis. Trend analysis basically is to check the trend. On the basis of this, sometimes we forecast the sales. On the basis of previous trend of sales, you can actually forecast sale of next year and next upcoming years as well. Then analysis of trade areas. If you have sales data all over the world, all over the country, then you can check whether which are the areas where sales is good and which are the areas where sales is not good. Maybe you want to check new area where your product should be sold. Then it is done with the help of analysis of trade areas. Then data-based marketing. What is it? Is actually practice of maintaining a customer database. How do you generally maintain a customer database? You will be maintaining the database with the help of every information related to that customer as well as product, because whenever there is a product and you have every detail related to the customer as per that product, then it could be really helpful, so as to check whether what kind of product is liked by the customer. For example, customer's name, their addresses, their past purchases, the responses to past efforts, and data from numerous sources related to that particular product. If you have some data in your hands about your current project related about the customers, then you can think of another product as well. If you have the data about your current product regarding the customers, like what kind of the products customers choose, what kind of promotions do customers like, what kind of the areas should you go with your product, so that would be helping you in marketing as well. How can we collect secondary data for these purposes, like fact finding, database marketing, and modeling? We have two kinds of data. One is internal, another one is external data. How internal data can be assessed and how it can be helpful, let us see. Internal data may be proprietary data and is more descriptive because the company has collected by its own, so that's why it's more important and more subjective. And the data may be accounting information, the way you'll be recording your accounts is also helpful. Then sales information, where sales is actually happening. Then back orders, customer complaints. Accounting information will help you in sales related information as well. Maybe money available to the company, cash available to the company, cash, maybe loans taken by the company, everything related to the money. Then sales information will help you how your sales is going, on. Then back orders will help you what kind of the customers are placing orders with you, or maybe about your own inventory as well. Then customer complaints would be helping in the liking of the product, whether customers are liking the product or not, and what kind of the features are not liked by the customers, because we are talking about complaints. These data can actually be for example, we talked about back orders, accounting information, how this would be helpful, like information producers, just in time inventory partner, computerized data can be used by the company. How? Because whenever you are placing an order, you are putting that particular information, or say you are recording that transaction in your accounting books, and that would be helpful here in just in time inventory partner. You'll know through that particular transaction that went to order. Then external data, how is it? This is created, recorded, or generated by an entity other than the researcher's organization. Generally, it is not recorded by your own organization. As the name is also suggesting, external data, data which is not actually available in the company, not actually created by the company itself. It might be government's data, it might be trade associations data, or maybe newspapers and journals. External data might be coming from libraries, the internet, the vendors, the producers, and books and periodicals in case of academics. Or these might be government sources, media sources, or commercial sources. Data can even be purchased. For example, government sources, statistical abstract of the United States, traditional distribution, indirect channel using intermediary can be, there's an information producer, he'll be selling the data to the library, or maybe providing data to the library, and company user can take the data from the library, or company user can take the data directly from information producer as well. That would be a direct channel. Or maybe some commercial sources like market share data companies like NC Nielsen provide information about sales and volume and brand share over information. Or maybe demographic and census updates. These can be collected through many organizations which supply census updates in easy to use or customer formats. There are organizations which go for this data. Or maybe attitude and public opinion research. These are the reports provided by syndicated service reports on the opinion polls. Or maybe consumption and purchase behavior data. Sometimes we just need consumers data. For that, you can go for these websites. Or maybe advertising research data, readership and audience data. What kind of the audience go for what kind of the advertisement, at what time should you be placing your advertisements. These kind of the data is available with advertising research agencies. There are some single data sources as well. For example, diverse types of data offered by single sources are like television viewing, scanner purchase data, or Prism and Cluster Plus data. These software provide data for companies. Prowess, Capitaline, you can actually collect data from these databases within just clicks, within matter of clicks. Because when you want to collect data of a company for maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or maybe if you want to collect data of 100 companies for 10 years, it might take you maybe months or maybe years, right? But when it comes to Prowess, Capitaline kind of databases, you can collect data within hours. So it's very easy these days through single source data due to secondary sources data. Maybe global secondary data are also helpful, but these would be having typical limitations, because when we generally say that whenever we are getting something as in to say easily, freely and flexibly, then there might be some limitations also for that particular thing. So there are some limitations for global secondary data as well. Maybe some additional pitfalls are also there. Some things are unavailable. For example, you want to collect data of global 100 companies. How would you collect it? You will be going to their websites, official websites, and you'll be collecting data from there, right? But sometimes they might have blocked users from some countries, so that would be a disadvantage. That would be a disadvantage for collecting the data. So there are so many things along with this. Some typical limitations when it comes to global thing. Then additional pitfalls are there. For example, like just mentioned, sometimes they block users from some countries. Some data is not available. For example, you want to search data for 10 years, but 1 year's data in between is not available. Then you won't be able to complete 10 years for that company. Or maybe questionable accuracy. Yes, that is very big question mark on secondary data. We are not 100% sure whether the data is accurate or not. Then lack of standardized terminology. Sometimes terminology is not standardized when it comes to global secondary data. For example, in India, there might be some other terminology used for consumer behavior, or maybe in some other country, they might be using some other terminology. So that is also a kind of pitfall or limitation, you can say. That's it. Now let us discuss some questions, some true false. Number 1, secondary data are typically historical data that have been already collected. Is it? Yes, secondary data is actually historical data collected beforehand. So it is true. Second, secondary data require current access to respondents who provided the data. Is it? No, that is actually primary data, which require current access to respondents. In secondary data, we do not actually require access to respondents. So that is false. The primary advantage of secondary data is their validity. No, not at all. Because when we talk about disadvantages, this is the primary disadvantage of secondary data, that they are sometimes not valid. So it is false. Whereas primary advantage is their availability. They are maximum available. So it's a false. Fourth, it is always possible to gather primary data needed for a research project. Is it? Sometimes it is actually not available. That is why we rely on secondary data, and that is why we go for research designs, so as to know whether data would be available or not. So it is a false. A disadvantage to secondary data is that they were not designed specifically to meet the objectives of the current project. Yes, this is 100% true. This is a kind of disadvantage of secondary data, that of course it is not designed for the current project in hand. It was designed for the project for which it was actually collected. So it is a true. Sixth, a disadvantage of secondary data is that the current researcher has no control over the accuracy of data. Is it? Yes, because the researcher who actually did the research, for that particular researcher, it was a primary data. After becoming secondary data, it is not actually 100% accurate. It might be accurate, but there is no guarantee, no control over the accuracy of data in the researcher's hand. So it is a false. It is a true, because we are talking about the disadvantage. 7, reliability compares data from one source with data from another source. Is it? When you compare data from one source to the other source, this is actually a kind of cross check. So it is false. Some self-assessment questions. Number 1, discuss the advantages and disadvantages of secondary data. What are the advantages and disadvantages of secondary data? Advantages are, these are freely available, these are very flexible, these are inexpensive, right? And whereas disadvantages are related to accuracy of the data and validity of the data. Second is, explain the 3 broad objectives that can be achieved using secondary data and give an example of each. What are the 3 broad objectives? We discussed it in slide. Number 1, fact finding, then model building, and then database marketing. You can come up with the examples by your own, because we have already discussed examples of all 3 broad categories in the PPT. Then third is, Identify various internal and proprietary sources of secondary data. Yes, we discussed them in detail. Internal data, accounting data, your orders data, your transactional data, everything which is internal, that can be discussed here with examples. Last is give examples of various external sources of secondary data and discuss how information as a product is distributed. We discussed distribution channels as well in 2-3 slides, that how we collect data traditionally, like you can collect data directly from the trading company, or you might get some intermediary in between as a library or something like that, right? So everything has been covered. So that's it. Thank you.